Let me add my welcome to the welcomes that you've heard this morning. This begins, I think, the rest of the day of kind of information overload. It will be very difficult to take it all in, and we understand that. But you need to make sure that if you take notes, and we've got handouts here, that you are accessing these materials repeatedly so that you become conversant with not just what it means to be a part of the alternate route program, but what it means to be part of Emporia State University, part of the Teachers College. There is a kind of its own vocabulary, there is a framework which I will be talking about here in about a minute. And then later today, this afternoon, after lunch, I'll come back and talk to you a little bit about one of our key assessments that every one of you will complete called the teacher work sample. So even those of you, for example, going into school counseling or school library media specialist will also do a teacher's work sample. We'll talk a little bit about that this afternoon, and I have a handout for that. You should have 3 handouts for this section of the day. The first one is titled The Teachers College Conceptual Framework. The second one is titled The Alternate Route Disposition Assessment. It's a 1-pager. And then the third one is the Due Process Procedure. That's a 2-pager, and the back page of that, or the second page of that, is actually a form that you'll tear off. And I'm going to need you to sign this and print that information. We do have extra forms if you don't have one. So let's see. Cameron?
Oh, she had to go to class.
Okay, we have a couple who don't have. We'll get them to you. So the second page of the due process form, you need to sign to acknowledge that you have received a copy of the policy, which is the first page. Okay. So we have a couple of slides here for the PowerPoint. They are drawn from the conceptual framework document that you have to give you kind of an overview. The conceptual framework is kind of the philosophical orientation that we have to preparing teachers, and you all are part of that framework. We are in the process of transitioning, so this is brand new. And in fact, this presentation is the first formal presentation that we've made outside the kind of the internal groups that needed to read and critique and approve this process, or approve the framework as part of our internal review process. So here's the image. You might see around, well here, this is our old conceptual framework, okay? And it's based on the tenets of critical thinker, effective practitioner, and creative planner, okay? We have now kind of evolved to a different perspective as we look at what we want to do with our teacher candidates to prepare them to be a good professional or a successful professional. So we have recast this conceptual framework into the professional educator. And that professional educator is the result of, is the product of competence in 6 different proficiencies. Okay? Here are the 6 proficiencies. We're going to go through each one. But you will see that this particular image will be replacing, of course, your brain eyes. Many of you, I think this might be your first time to Visser Hall, but you'll see these scattered, displayed throughout the building.
And it's on the front of there. It's on the front of there.
And it's on the front of your booklet. So we're going to go through each one of these, tell you a little bit about each one of them, and then with each one, and there will be a sample of a knowledge, of a skill, and of a disposition. So it's not just enough to identify or define the proficiency. Under each proficiency or associated with each proficiency are the knowledge base that is required for you to know in order to be proficient in that area. The skills, what is it that you need to be able to do? What do we need you to do in order to be a professional educator? And then the dispositions, these kind of frames of mind, these attitudes, these values that you need to possess or hone or develop in order to be a professional educator. So every one of these proficiencies is associated with a cluster of knowledge, skills, and dispositions. The handout has the complete list. For today's presentation, since my time is limited, I'm just going to give you a sample of each one. So here's our first proficiency: provide service to society. Now, many of you come in with an appreciation of education, an awareness of the importance of education to society. Now we want you to kind of incorporate that even more strongly into your thinking and into your understanding, so that you are even more motivated to be that professional educator. So from a knowledge perspective, characteristics of diverse learners. When you are in your classroom, you will not be able to pick and choose who your students will be. All right? You will be having to play the hand you're dealt. And there could be children, and there will be children, from all kinds of backgrounds. There'll be children from the very traditional nuclear family. There'll be children from extended families. There'll be children from broken families. There'll be children who will come from maybe very poor backgrounds. There'll be, of course, boys and girls, and you'll have children that might be Hispanic, and children white, black, whatever. Okay? And you will need to be prepared to work with all children, regardless of their backgrounds. The skills. Here's an example of one of the skills. Integrate and use concepts from general content and professional studies in the educational environment. It's not enough to know to teach. All right? You've got to develop those skills to present in a way that is understandable, and work with your students so that they are competent in the knowledge in the content area. Okay? And that's part of that integration too. So across all the different content areas, you can bring something. For those of you teaching business, you can bring something in from history. You can bring something in from science. Those of you teaching science can bring something in from math, something in from language arts. Disposition, talking about professionalism and ethical standards. The second proficiency applies interdisciplinary scholarly knowledge. The philosophical, historical, social, and theoretical foundations of education would be one of the knowledge competencies. To integrate knowledge across and within disciplines. I talked a little bit about this just a minute ago. Okay? So you don't only want to be attuned and aware about the content knowledge in your own area. You want to be able to continue to seek connections, connectedness across all the different content areas, and then bring that into your classroom. Right? Bring that up to your children, your students. Dispositions, a willingness to think critically about content, curriculum planning, teaching and learning, pedagogy, innovative technology, and assessment. So you have that willingness, almost that curiosity, okay? And you want to wear your curiosity on your sleeve. You want to model that curiosity so that your students will, in turn, display that curiosity. Even those seniors who think they know everything and you can't teach them anything, you can still model that curiosity. Proficiency 3 engages in practical action. Teaching and learning is a dynamic, constructive, and metacognitive process where some of this terminology, some of the ideas behind these competencies will be part of the coursework that you'll be taking. Create learning experiences commensurate with the student's level of readiness. Okay. You might hear the term developmentally appropriate. Obviously, if you're teaching a 7th grader, you would teach that student a little differently than you might teach a 12th grader. Actually, you might teach a 12th grader a little differently than a 10th grader. Dispositions, a desire to analyze concepts, evaluate clinical practices, experiment, and initiate innovative practices as needed. So are you a tinkerer? Are you willing to kind of mix it up and try something a little different? This is what this disposition is about. To try to do that, to feel comfortable, not just experimenting if you're in science, but experimenting with different ways to present, different ways of getting your students engaged in learning. Response to uncertainty and change. This is about you, your ability to respond. You're ready to go and there's an emergency. You're ready to go and there's a pep assembly. You're ready to go and half your class is gone because it's the day for taking pictures. It's homecoming today and we we alternate or we interfere with the schedule, and that interferes with what you had planned. And so how do you adapt? Somebody gets sick in your classroom. How do you adapt? Okay. There's an emergency. How do you adapt? What do you do differently? How do you respond to that? So there are a variety of situations that can occur in a day that will require you to modify, and you just might not simply accomplish all that you set out to accomplish in your lesson plan. So how will you deal with that uncertainty and change? The appropriate technology and how it may be used to enhance teaching and learning. A skill integrate effective behavior management into all interactions with students. And one of the dispositions, or a sample disposition, a commitment to challenge all students to learn and to help every child to succeed. Again, for each proficiency in your handout, all of these are provided. All right, and I've just picked selected ones to give you a flavor for each of these proficiencies in your comments. Next to the last proficiency, participates in self-reflection. When I come back this afternoon and talk about the teacher work sample, the final part of this teacher work sample is a self-reflection, and that has been over time the most difficult, or one of the most difficult elements of the teacher work sample. All right? It is something to work on, and perhaps you are comfortable reflecting, all right, thinking about how things could have gone better, thinking about what could be done differently and how that might change the outcome to be more desirable for meeting objectives and curriculum goals. So as you engage in this self-reflection as a teacher, as a professional educator, appropriate techniques for teaching and using self-reflection strategies. This is something that you would want to be able to know. We would want you to know. Skills, employ appropriate assessment techniques in order to measure student performance and growth. And dispositions, a sample disposition of belief that curriculum planning and teaching practices be meaningful, engaging, and adapted to the needs of diverse learners in your classrooms. The last one belongs to a professional community. The knowledge, skills, and sample knowledge, competency, teamwork, and practices for creating healthy environments for learning and teaching, so you would be knowledgeable about the elements, the ingredients for teaming, for a successful team. Skills, recognize and appropriately respond to the need for ongoing self-development and professional development in response to professional standards of practice. And the dispositions, a desire to collaborate with colleagues, parents, and community members and other educators to improve student learning. So these are these 6 proficiencies. These become the anchor for how we go about producing professional educators. Now, it won't be immediately, but over the course of time, you will see these 6 proficiencies start making their way into the syllabi that you will receive as you take the different courses in the alternate route program. It could very well be that for this fall semester, you might see in the syllabus the critical thinker, creative planner, effective practitioner, which is the kind of the outgoing conceptual framework. So it will take us some time to make that transition to the new conceptual framework. The outgoing one has been around for about 17 years. So, this is not something that we do and then 5 years later. This is something that once it's done, it's kind of established. And we kind of conform to the conceptual framework. Any questions about that before we go on? Okay, well, you need to know that anytime you have questions, you need to feel free to ask. Anybody who's up here, certainly Kirsten is always open to all your questions, and it's okay. To be a good learner, you got to be asking questions. You want your students to be good learners. You want them to be asking questions. You want to create a classroom environment where there'll be a comfort level for them to ask questions, and so don't hesitate to do that if you can. Okay. There are 3 other pieces today in my section of the agenda today. One of them is to talk about options. You don't have this on a handout. This particular slide you don't have on a handout. One of them is to talk about options if you do not have a job. Another part that I'm going to talk about is about dispositions and disposition assessment, and you do have a handout for that. And then the final piece before I'm done with my session for this morning is to talk to you a little bit about due process. If you are terminated from the program, what rights do you have to appeal? Okay, and you do have a handout about that. Okay, so right now, if you are in the program and you do not have a job, and that is a requirement in order to move from the restricted to the initial license, you can still move through the initial license. Now, we recognize that there are life situations that may prohibit you from doing this. Okay, we recognize that, but this is the one option we have right now, and we have two others that are pending approval. When we get back into the swing of the new semester, we will bring these to the different councils that review graduate programming in for teacher ed. So this is one option here, this post-baccalaureate option. That is approved, that's ready for you. There is a series of courses that you take. This is phase one, these series of courses. I meant actually to bring that. It's about, I think it's 10 hours of coursework. It's Ed Psych. It's principles of classroom management. There's one other one as well. But anyway, you can take that classwork. That would be the phase one, and then you can do a semester of student teaching. And that would then provide you with what you would need for the university to recommend to the Kansas State Department of Education that you be licensed, that you receive the initial license. I'm making some assumption, although that might not necessarily be a good one, that you're familiar with the difference between the restricted license and the initial license. In the alternate route program, since you have not come through a teacher training program, you obtain a restricted license if you have a teaching job. Okay, and then everything that you do as part of the alternate route program you do in order to move from the restricted license to the initial license. Okay. That's what those are the parameters. That's what defines why you do and what you do, what you're doing when you're in the alternate route program. Okay. The other two options that are pending approval would be to work with the faculty. I see Dr. Schrock back here who teaches the biology methods. So you would take the methods course from Dr. Schrock, for example, if you were working on biology, and then you would do a semester of student teaching. Another one would be to do 2 semesters of student teaching, the idea being that the essentially second semester of student teaching, or one of those semesters, would be in lieu of the methods course. This would be done with the approval of the director of that program. All right, so the biology program director would say this is okay, or the business education would say this is okay. So right now, these two are just pending approval. This is the only option right now if you are not.
Can I add that
Yes.
options 2 and 3, that means you've already completed the coursework for the alternate route program, so you can
Yes,
have
thank
classroom
you.
management and all that stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to make the transition now to dispositions. This definition I obtained from the book that is published by NCATE. NCATE is the acronym for the organization that accredits Emporia State University. It stands for the National Council for the Accreditation of Teacher Education. You can go online, www.ncate.org. Okay. That accreditation requires us to ensure that we are doing a good job preparing professional educators, and part of that doing a good job is to try to produce evidence that you're doing a good job, right? So our success is literally linked to your success in the classroom, and I'll talk more about that linkage this afternoon when I talk about this teacher work sample, and you'll have a little clearer sense of that. Anyway, with NCATE, we are evaluated about every 7 years or so for knowledge, essentially what we're teaching our students and how well they know, skill level, the skills of being a teacher or a school counselor or a library media specialist, and then the dispositions. The skills and the knowledge usually are the ones that students or candidates pretty much wrap their minds around. The dispositions can be a little fuzzy. I don't know if I'll make it any less fuzzy, but I'm going to try. This is the definition coming right out of NCATE. So what are dispositions? They are professional attitudes, values, and beliefs demonstrated through both verbal and nonverbal behaviors as educators interact with students, families, so for example, the parents of the students or a parent of a student, colleagues, and communities. These positive behaviors support student learning and development. Okay. There are two dispositions that NCATE requires us to ensure that we fulfill. One is fairness, and the second one is a commitment, the belief that all students can learn. Okay. So, part of this is examining your own biases. Do you believe that some students are more capable, or do you believe that there are some students who cannot learn? Okay. Now, the Teachers College has the option, and has exercised that option, to define other professional attitudes, beliefs that become part of those dispositions. And you will see that in that handout. That one-page handout, all right, lists 14 dispositions divided into 3 sections. So there you see, everybody with me now, the one-page handout. You'll see the 3 sections: commitment to professionalism and ethical standards, desire to analyze, evaluate concepts and clinical practices, to experiment and to evaluate and or initiate innovative practice. And then the 3rd section is dedication to lifelong learning by participating in professional organizations and by being current with research in their field. So these are 14 dispositions clustered into 3 areas or 3 sections. Now, this particular 2 things. One, this assessment form is in transition because it needs to be connected with our new conceptual framework. Okay? And that process is happening right now. Okay? So as a result of that comparison, some of these may change. This list might grow to 20 instead of 14. It's unclear. But it will be more aligned with the dispositions that are part of the conceptual framework handout that you have. Okay? But the second piece is that the procedure will stay the same. Your mentor teacher will complete this for you, or your mentor at your school will complete this 3 times. The first time will be in your first semester. The second time, these items are embedded in a formal assessment that your mentor teacher will complete on you as part of your evaluation. And then at the end of the program, there will be the 3rd evaluation. And these data will come in, and they will be part of the database, right, to see how you are doing, but to also see how the program is doing. And we use this as part of our assessment of the program. Okay. So this is something that you want to be aware of, and as this changes, or if this changes, you will be the first to know. Okay, as all of our teacher ed candidates will be the first to know. Okay, but this gives you whatever is going. If there's something that's going to take this place, it'll be close. It'll be close to this. You will see that the bottom 3rd of the form is essentially a checklist. One of those items will be checked. Will be checked by the evaluator. In this case, your mentor teacher. So if things are looking pretty good and there's really no concern, that top sentence, that top evaluation, or that top rating gets checked. If there are a couple that may need improvement, then that's going to be checked. That middle one will be checked. And if there is something more pervasive, if there are concerns that are more pervasive, then it's the bottom one that's checked. Okay. So let me conclude talking a little bit about due process. What is due process? The steps that are available to you should the alternate route program terminate you as a student. Now, we don't want that to happen at all. Okay, but sometimes stuff does happen, and so we need to have policy and procedures in place, and we need to make sure that you are aware of your rights as a student and as a part of the ESU community. If you're terminated by the school, that's it, because you're working as part of the job. Whatever rights, whatever due process you have, that you work that out with the school. But should something happen that the program terminates you, that the ESU program terminates you, then you do have rights, all right, that you can appeal that decision. And the two-page handout that's stapled, the first page are the steps that we go through should you decide to appeal. And it talks about you're having 3 working days to alert me as the associate dean in writing that you wish to appeal that decision, that I then have a set amount of time to convene a candidate appeals hearing committee that will be made up of, I think the makeup is there. It's going to be made up of 2 members of the alternate route advisory committee, a faculty member in your content area, and either another candidate who's in your content area or a graduate student in your content area, if we can't get hold of a candidate. And so that panel of 4 will hear the concerns. The student will come and present his or her case. The director of the alternate route program will be there as well to answer any questions should the committee have one. And then the committee essentially has a day to make a decision, and then there are options there depending on what the committee decides. If the committee holds the decision to terminate, then you do have one more appeal level to you. That's to the dean of the college. If the committee says to reinstate you, if the school is willing to take you, then you go right back. You'll go right back into the school. Perhaps the district might be willing to reinstate you or instate you someplace else. You'd be another option would be to find a new placement, and then finally that post-baccalaureate option would be that. So the second page that you have is a page that essentially just says that you have received it. You have received this policy. That is a page that I need you to sign and write that information. If you do not know your E-number, don't worry about it. If you've got it someplace, that would be wonderful. But if you don't have it, that's so we understand that. And then, Dr. Limbert, if you'll take up those sheets, some tissues. I know it's a lot of stuff. But you've got the handouts that you can access. I'm back. I'll be with you at lunch, and then I'll be back with you right after lunch. So if you have any kinds of questions to ask about anything, not just what I talked about, I'll be glad to try to answer.
And the post-baccalaureate option, is that just, once again, secondary level, or can
just
you
secondary.
also pursue? Okay.
Just secondary. Yeah.
But does it encompass those that are K-12 programs like music and?
You know, I forget that we have K-12 programs.
Yeah, we have 4 K-12 programs: arts, Spanish, music,
that's right.
and physical education. That's K-12. Otherwise,
I'll have to.